This is beginning with New Testament Greek, covering perfect indicative verbs, chapter 15 of Merkle and Plummer's Beginning with New Testament Greek textbook. Today we'll go over the meaning of the perfect tense, discuss the paradigms and morphology, explain what reduplication is, cover a few irregular forms and the meaning and form of the pluperfect, do a little bit of review, and finish up with vocab. So first, the meaning of the perfect tense. The imperfect tense, as we've learned, is a past action that was occurring progressively in the past. So it began in the past and it has continued in the past in some way. The aorist is a simple assertion of a past event that began in the past and concluded at a certain time. So imperfect would be I was conquering, and the aorist would be I conquered, that simple past. The present tense has the idea of an action that is occurring now or is underway. I am conquering. So the perfect tense is a combination of these imperfect and present and aorist tenses. So the perfect is there is an action that was completed in the past, but it results in a state of affairs that is continuing into the present. So it's sort of a combination of that aorist and present tense. I have conquered. The meaning is completed in the past, or the action is completed in the past, and it results in continuing consequences. So the action itself does not continue in the present, but the state of affairs it produces continues into the present. So for now, you should translate the perfect aspect with an English past perfect verb. So leluka would be I have loosed. In the perfect tense is not as common in the Greek New Testament as other tenses, so it's slightly more significant when you see it used. So here we have John 13:3. I have conquered the world. So the D.A. Carson says the decisive battle has been waged and won. The world continues its wretched attacks, but those who are in Christ share the victory he has won. They cannot be harmed by the world's evil, and they know who triumphs in the end. This is the use of a perfect tense. And very famously, it has been finished, tetelestai. This is a perfect tense. This one-word summary, says Dr. Mounts, of Jesus' life and death is perhaps the most important statement in all of Scripture because Jesus fully completed his task. The ongoing effects are that you and I are offered free gift of salvation so we can be with him forever. This is in the perfect tense. It is an action that happened in the past, but the effects of this have implications into the present tense. And here in 1 Corinthians 15:4, he has been raised. So here you're seeing the passive tense. He has been raised, implying that he was both raised from the dead and still lives, says Dr. Gordon-Conwell. So there are some occasions when the author does not intend that full significance of meaning in the perfect, for instance, in Romans 13:8, and context must determine how each verb is used. Dr. Plummer has a great illustration that he has used and explains more in his video on chapter 15, so I would commend that to you. So now we know a little bit about the perfect tense. Let's look at how it's formed. As with other tenses, we will turn to our handy-dandy luo, and you'll start with the stem, the lu. And this reduplication is what makes the perfect stem, one, very easy to notice when you are working in translation, and two, unique because it's the only tense that utilizes reduplication. Reduplication is where you take the first letter and you add it to the front of the word and put an epsilon in between. So here you have lelu as your reduplicated first sound. And if reduplication wasn't enough, you're also going to see this unique kappa at the end of your stem. You will find that not all of our perfect and pluperfect tenses will utilize this kappa, but the kappa can help you really determine that it is a perfect tense. And then you're going to add the alpha connecting vowel. And you'll add your personal endings. For the first person singular, this will stay the same. So here are your perfect active indicative endings. You'll notice that these are exactly the same as the first aorist, except for in the variation of the third person plural. You have le luca, le lucas, le lucain, le lucamen, le lucate, le lucasin, or le lucan. So now let's take a look at the perfect middle passive indicative. First, you'll start with luo, that lu stem. And you will do the same with reduplication. However, there is no kappa added to the end of the stem in the middle perfect. You also will not have any connecting vowels. You will just add the present endings directly on to the reduplicated stem. So you will need to rely on the reduplication to help you notice that it's a perfect. So altogether, you have lelumai. Here are your perfect middle passive indicative endings. You'll notice that they are the same as your present middle endings. However, what you're going to see in the second person singular is the true second middle ending. Because there is no connecting vowel here, there's no change that's happening with that sigma, so lelusai is your middle second person passive, your middle passive indicative form for this. So lelumai, lelusai, lelutai, lelumetha, lelusthe, leluntai. So let's discuss reduplication a little bit more because this will be key to noticing when you have a perfect verb. It wouldn't be Greek if there weren't some variations. So in reduplication, there are some variations. You have vocalic reduplication, aspirant reduplication, and compound verb reduplication. In vocalic reduplication, these are verbs that begin with a vowel. So similarly to your aorist augment or imperfect augment, reduplication is going to cause that initial vowel to be lengthened. So instead of agapao, you have agapeka. And your lexical form, agapao, your imperfect form will be agapon. Your aorist form will be agapensa, and your perfect form will be agapenka. So in vocalic reduplication, you'll notice that words will act similarly to how you lengthen with an augment. However, that kappa will often tip you off that you're not in the imperfect or the aorist, you're in the perfect tense. So with verbs that begin with a diphthong, that first vowel will typically lengthen, and that causes the iota to become subscript. So aiteo becomes ateka. Some verbs that begin with a vowel will reduplicate the first two letters. So akuo becomes akeoa. And erkomai is very unique, and it becomes elelutha. So you may want to reference the chart on page 304 and 305 in your book. That helps you to see some of these principal parts. Verbs that begin with two consonants sometimes don't fully reduplicate, but they simply add an epsilon. So gnosko becomes egnoka. The next reduplication variation is aspirant reduplication. So these are verbs that begin with an aspirant letter, theta, phi, chi, and you're going to reduplicate those with the non-aspirant counterparts. So a theta will often become a tau, a phi will often become a pi, and a chi will become a kappa. So therapevo becomes te therapevumai. Phanero becomes pe phaneromai. And charizomai becomes ke charismai. And so that memory help is your th becomes a t, Your PH becomes a P and your CH becomes a C. And lastly, what do you do with compound verbs? How do you reduplicate something with a compound verb? So similarly, you're not going to reduplicate at the beginning. You didn't change the first letter in your compound verbs when you added your augment. So you're going to find apoluo becomes apolelusa. So you're going to have that reduplication occurring after the prefix. So kata bebeka. Now let's look at a few irregular forms. So similar to second aorist, you're going to find that some words kind of have a second perfect form, and they tend to be a lot of the same words. So these irregular forms are resulting from the problems that would be caused by reduplication and the addition of the kappa tense formative. So taking a look at some of these are some of your most frequently occurring irregular forms. And looking at that principal parts of the irregular forms on page 304 to 305 and getting familiar with them. Most of the time you're going to be getting the actual inflected form in the perfect. So can you get back to what the lexical form is? Can you recognize the word if you don't have some of those letters that you're used to seeing? And some are irregular not because of the way the kappa or the reduplication hits them, but these are because they have irregular stems. So these stems begin with a diphthong or have stems that are borrowed from other word forms. So some of these look very different than what you are used to, although some of them may be similar to your aorist forms. So you may want to write some of these irregular forms as a part of your note card, that if you're making note cards, you will want to note some of these that are a little bit different. And some of your forms will be created by this irregular perfect happening after a tau, a delta, theta, or a zeta dropping before adding that kappa. This is similar to the tau, the data, and the theta dropping when you add the sigma in the future or aorist tense. So ingizo does not become ingizeka, it becomes eginka. Now let's take a look at the pluperfect. The pluperfect is the past tense of the perfect. So this form includes an augment, reduplication, tense formative kappa, and connecting vowels, epsilon iota. This form only occurs 86 times in the New Testament. One is he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons, from Mark 16:9. You'll often hear this called the past perfect tense. And with that, you've learned all the Greek verb tenses. So let's review and distinguish them. There are 6 main tenses and 5 that you will use the most often: the present, the imperfect, the future, the aorist, and the perfect, as well as the pluperfect. This textbook does not go into the pluperfect as much since it is so infrequently used. In your active voice, the subject is performing the action. So in the present tense, you're going to say, I loose, or I am loosing. The imperfect, you're going to add that helping word from the past tense of to be, I was loosing. The future, you'll add the future sense, I will loose. The aorist is that strictly past tense, I loosed. And in the perfect, you add that helping word again, I have loosed. And if you were doing the pluperfect, it would be I had loosed. In the passive voice, the subject is receiving the action. The present would be I am being loosed, or I am loosed. The imperfect was I was being loosed. The future is I will be loosed. The aorist is I was loosed. And the perfect is I have been loosed, whereas the pluperfect would be I had been loosed. In the middle voice, you're going to translate this with some reference to the subject being the performer and the receiver of the action, whether they are doing it for themselves or they are involved in the action somehow. So the present, this might look like I am loosing for myself. The imperfect, I was loosing for myself. The future, I will loose for myself. The aorist, I loosed for myself. Perfect, I have loosed for myself. And the pluperfect, I had loosed for myself. Finally, let's take a look at your vocab for this chapter. The vocabulary in this chapter is going to be preparing you to cover adjectives in the next chapter. So you're going to see something different at the end of these words. So agathos is followed by the eta and an on. These are the feminine and neuter endings. So you may not need to necessarily memorize these if you can decline a word using the standardized endings. So agathos is a word that means good. And then there's hagios. Notice the rough breathing mark there. This is a word that means holy and saints. If you notice that this stem ends in an iota, so you're going to use that alpha pi rule, where things that end with a rho, an iota, or an epsilon, if your stem ends in those, you take off the os and it ends in one of those three letters, you're going to be following the alpha conjugation rules. So next is allos. This is another, other, or different. Dikaios, this is a word for righteous, just. Heteros, notice again that rough breathing mark, heteros. This is the similar, rough, another, other, or different. So there's some debate as if it's another of the same kind or another of a similar kind, and they're pretty much used interchangeably. Next we have kalos. This is a word for good or beautiful. Maybe the word calligraphy can be a helpful reminder of beautiful handwriting. Megas, megalane, and mega. So when the word is given to you in three separate words, the adjective has varying forms. So what you're seeing is the masculine, feminine, and neuter forms in that nominative singular form. So here you have large or great, megas, megalane, mega. Nekros is dead. Pas, pasapan, every, all. Pas, pasapan, again, the masculine, feminine, and neuter. Then you have pistos, this is faithful, believing. Polus, pole, polu is much, many, large, great. Again, in the masculine, feminine, and neuter. Poneros, evil, wicked. Noon, now at present, maybe the time, it's high noon. Now will help you remember that. Palin means again. And this is our word a for other or than. This is not our feminine article. This is got the smooth breathing mark, so it's an a. So these are your adjectives. You'll be learning a lot more, and I hope I'll see you in chapter 16.